But, okay, we got this going here. So the modification of times billing services by law. Some things by law require accurate timekeeping. Sarbanes-Oxley, HIPAA rules. HIPAA is, if you've ever had to deal with HIPAA, it is a painful thing. You keep records. You have to protect everything that goes on, and we would appreciate that if it's it's not a big deal if it's somebody else's information that got stolen, but it becomes a whole lot more personal when it's ours. And this is just a slight introduction to the NTP. Time synchronization determines the consistency of NFS network file system timestamps. Encryption key expiration times. That could be a really big deal because there are instances where we would have the keys expire. There are instances where we would have the keys rotate. And if we have two devices that are rotating keys on different times, then we're going to lose the connectivity for those things. Timestamps used by incremental backups. The programmers make files and applications. Uses HPUX uses NTP to maintain time synchronization. The times can be different in here without NTP. We got 902.15, 903.02, 901.52, and with time synchronization, they're all going to be the same. And that's the objective of the protocol, is to be able to have a time master, and the time master could be on our network, will be on our network. We can have it use its internal clock, or we can have it synchronize from someplace else. And I keep going back to Windows because that's what we used, and I was a Windows administrator for a lot of years. Windows has a built-in in the network, the servers in the Active Directory environment. There is one called the primary domain emulator, the primary domain controller emulator, PDC emulator, which becomes the time master. It sends its time, whatever that is, to all of the other devices that are in that domain so that they can all have the same time. We can then have it synchronize its clock with one of the time servers that is outside of our domain, one that the time trickles down from a nuclear clock, a master clock from someplace. And there are a number of those. There are some, we use a little NTP server, and I don't know what it was, as a free NTP server that we got, that we could pick where we wanted to synchronize from. Microsoft has them built in. If you do a Wireshark on your network, you're probably going to see time go in and out on your workstation, because how do they keep the accurate time? You're probably not, I know I'm certainly not running a time server on my network. They go to Microsoft to get the time. Another one of those traffic things that we have going on with these guys. So the NTP server and the NTP client, I guess let's just look at a little quick. And NTP is a pretty simple thing, and the configuration is even simpler that goes on. We're going to have an NTP master. If I want to make, and I think I made this router the NTP master, and we can see that with the show run. And if I go down here to the bottom, we have this one statement, NTP master. It is now a master, which means that it's going to be sending time synchronization to all of the devices that subscribe to it. It's not going to say, okay, you guys are going to take time from me. It is going to be the giver, the sender, instead of the receiver for that. Away from NTPD rather, yeah. Everybody's using, and we are getting more and more, in David's comment there, NTPD, more and more new protocols. Same way with DNS. A number of servers are going to secure DNS instead of just the straight DNS, because of all of the interferences that go on the network with a lot of these really old protocols. And a lot of these are really old protocols. This one's not anywhere new. I think that it was 1983 or something like that is when this protocol came about. So we have this thing. There are a couple of commands show NTP, and this one shouldn't have any NTP associations. It's associated with itself because it's the master. it is the master, but we can also have it go get its time from someplace else so that it can go get time from a different server and then send that time, more accurate time, to the other servers. And in order for them to sign up, they just simply go down here, and we'll look at the command here again. Simply go down here and say NTP server 192.168.5.1. If I use the show clock, and this one should be close because I did set the clock on the NTP master when it started, when these things started. Let me drag this over. This is the time that it had, 23:15:40 on March the 3rd, 2020, which was the last time that this simulator had been run for that particular thing. So it, after a few minutes, and it was a few minutes because it was a long way out of time, was able to synchronize itself with the server, with the time server. And we have the asterisk here for these things. If I do a show NTP status, let's look at the status first. NTP status clock is unsynchronized, stratum 16, no reference clock. Well, golly, I guess we went out of time. Show NTP associations, and it says that it is associated with 192.168.5.1. Show clock, April the 28th, and it looks like that's pretty close. Anyhow, I was kind of, when the NTP status, that it says it's unsynchronized, stratum 16, because it should be synchronizing with that one. It says it's never been up, pull interval is 4, never been updated. It obviously was updated because you saw some of the time changes, and I'll just scroll up here. Some of the shows, it always showed it as unsynchronized, and it will eventually, I hope at least, get into the synchronized. The stratum 16, and we'll look at stratum, and it is nothing magic. What stratum says is that, hey, I'm going to, this is how far away the time server is, which gives you an idea of how much delay that there's going to be. So we can go into this one, config T, because it do show clock, because it's one of those that I haven't set, that is way off, and I left it there. NTP server was 192.168.5.1. Does that sound right? It won't tell me it won't tell me if I'm wrong. Yeah, that 5.1. It'll just say okay, and then won't do anything. Let's see, and so show NTP association. So it says that its initialization, it is trying to get to this server here. And if we show NTP status, this one should be unsynchronized, stratum 16, when we do that thing. Drift from files. So we'll let this one run a little bit and look at the slides, and then come back and see if it has actually done anything for us. I'm getting rid of that image here. So when we do these things, an internet protocol synchronizes the times of the devices by exchanging time signals, works at the application layer of the TCP IP-OSI model, sends periodic time requests to servers to obtain the server timestamps, and adjusts the client's clock based on the server timestamp. Time synchronization is important to the network. Timestamps on log messages, some of the things that we saw. User authentication. And when we talk about encryption, one of the things that we used to prevent replay was timestamps, that we marked the packets with a time so that they couldn't be replayed. Oh yeah, this one, the timestamp, the protocol looks at it. This thing is like 3 days old. I'm not going to accept that. So timestamps can be used for those. We can use authentication to ensure that we are taking time from our devices. The NTP authentication, we create keys here. NTP authentication key is going to be on the device, and then the trusted keys to authenticate the time source at the client. To define the authentication keys, we define them on the server, and then we apply them at the client, the ones that's going to be taking the information from one to the other. It permits the time synchronization only after ensuring that the authentication keys are valid. And if they're not valid, it's just simply not going to accept the time for it. It discards the NTP packets in that case. The client's Cisco device, or any other device can act as a client. Receive the time updates from the NTP server. NTP server IP address, we saw that in the configuration, allows the clock to be synchronized to the NTP server, and then the server is identified as a client. Show NTP status displays the current status of the NTP synchronization that goes on with these things. And let's see if this one's done anything yet. Status, and it still says it. Oh, good, here. Well, this one at least got synchronized. Clock is synchronized, stratum 9, and we'll look at the stratums. That's because I defined one on the master. Reference 192.168.5.1, the nominal frequency, the offset, the things that go on. So this thing is synchronized. And what I show NTP associations, what I was trying to get here, when we are synchronized, we'll have the star as well as the tilde in front of the address of the NTP master. That's also one of the indicators that we're in time with this thing. So they can act as peers and provide time synchronization to other devices. IP addresses for the peer associations statically configured on the peer devices to enable communication. Remember, if we're using DHCP addresses, the NTP server is one of those things that can be configured to be sent via DHCP. Show NTP associations, the NTP status, and the NTP associations are the two big commands for this. And then you've seen the term stratum a couple of times here. And what it really is a measure of how far away the time server is. How far away are we from the stratum devices? The stratum 0 devices are going to be the most accurate ones, but they're not connected to the internet. GPS is as good as you can do for all of these things. When we go on the time servers on the stratum, and you saw it in the configuration, preventing loops, a measure of synchronization distance from the primary time source. How far away are we? How many time servers away are we? Stratum 0 devices are the most accurate ones. They're the atomic clocks, the GPS clocks. Michael says GPS is as good as you can get. Are the most accurate. But they're not connected to the internet, to the network. We can't get our time from them. They're used as a reference clock for the Stratum 1 devices, and then the Stratum 1 devices connected to the Stratum 2 devices on down the line are the most accurate when we do these things from one to the other, accessible via a network connection, and they're normally synchronized via Stratum 0, a reference clock, to do those things. The system and network timing does not seem to be affected as transport devices. The system and network devices as transport devices. You're talking about in the delay, Michael? When we do these things affected by, and I think that's what he's talking about, I'm not sure. How many hops away are we? I'm going to have an image here in just a second when we do that. The Stratum 2 devices to the Stratum 1 devices on down the line. So when we look at these things, the authoritative clock, Stratum 1 devices are connected to it, to the Stratum 2, Stratum 3 on down the line. when we saw ours, it said it was a Stratum 1 device, the one that actually did get synchronized. And I think when I configured this, and it may be the default that they're show run. Yeah, it is, because this is just an NTP server, NTP master. The Cisco devices will default as a Stratum 8 device when we do these things. Try the time for a Stratum 1. And they define NetAdmins. Yeah, NetAdmin, I agree. We have so many devices that are available to us that we're usually in pretty good shape for these things. But what I wanted to do, Fig T, and do NTP master, and then after that, act as a master clock 1 to 15. These are going to be the stratums that we set for these things. So we can specify what stratum we want our devices to be. They will, and we can connect to some of these other devices when we do those things from one to the other. And this one actually did get synchronized, and I think this one never did. I wonder if I did something really odd with it. Show NTP status, and it still says that it is unsynchronized. Let's see if we did something clever like do authentication and not have any keys. 192.168.5.1. And we get there. So they just don't want to play in the game, I guess, today. But you did see the other one that did get synchronized.